So I call to order meeting number 1778, the Planning and Zoning Commission at 6:30 PM. I'm going to ask for a roll call for the record. Joe Willett is here.
Richard Sullivan is here.
Frank Gowdy is here.
Mike Kowalski's here.
Jim Thur's here.
Ann Gobin is here.
Marty Zagilo is here.
Yeah,
And Frank, you're there as well.
yes.
Okay. In accordance to my notes on a rotation, since Tim is not here, I need to elevate one of the alternates to be a voting member. And Frank, I have you on my notes as next in the rotation. Is that okay with you?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. All right. You already established a quorum. There was a legal notice. East Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission will hold a regular meeting on Tuesday, April 14th, 2020 at 6:30 PM via the remote conferencing, video conferencing platform Zoom. The following public hearing will be heard. Application East Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission for a text amendment to the East Windsor zoning regs for alcohol sales. Copies of the above application are available online and at the Planning and Development Office. All interested persons may attend online, and public hearing to be heard on this topic. It's dated March 31st, 2020. This appeared in the Journal Enquirer on April 2nd, as well as April 9th, 2020. There was an added agenda item. There was a request from MMCT, that's the Tribal Nations Joint Venture Company, for a zone change request at 113, 115, and 119 Prospect Hill Road. We'll talk about that in a few minutes later on when we receive the applications, but that was the added agenda item. This is the public participation of our meeting. Are there any members of the audience out there that like to have any comments for the commission for something that's not already on tonight's agenda? Okay. Next up, approval of minutes, March 24th, 2020. Anybody have any comments, concerns, edits, changes, anything to talk about?
Everything looks fine to me.
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of meeting, and I can't tell you the number,
1777.
1777 as written.
There's a motion by Commissioner Sullivan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jim. Any discussion? Hearing none, I call for a vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that was unanimous approval. Receipt of applications. There was one. Zone change application, MMCT Venture LLC for parcels located at 113, 115, and 119 Prospect Hill Road for zone change from R2 to B1. That's residential to business. So that's going to be scheduled for a public hearing at a future meeting.
Joe? This is
Yes.
Frank, is that the casino properties?
Those are three residential properties that are front on Route 5, adjacent to the property that was approved for the casino.
Yeah, okay. In other words, the casino owns them and they're just going to change the zone.
Correct. Yep.
Thank
We'll
you.
be talking about it at length at a public hearing, most likely the next meeting.
Thank you.
Next up, performance bonds. Meadow Farms, calling of any and all erosion and sedimentation control bonds associated with Meadow Farms project. I call to the commission's attention a memo that went between looks like the, town attorney, first selectman, and a bunch of other department heads. And essentially, I'm not going to read it verbatim. There's really no evidence that the Planning and Zoning Commission called a $14,000 remaining erosion sedimentation bond associated with the project. In that that 14,000 was the summation of the two phases. Phase 1 had 7,000 remaining. Phase 2 had 7,000 remaining. That's how they came up with the 14,000 of perhaps bonds that have not been called. So to dot our I's and cross our T's, staff thought it were appropriate if this commission were to make a motion to call specifically the remaining erosion sedimentation bond for the Meadow Farms project. This is just a formality. It was pretty clear our last motion, but I guess there's no harm in doing this, and that's what staff has recommended, that we take those actions. Anybody have any questions or comments regarding what we've been asked to do?
I'm fine with it. I guess it's just a formality because we've done this already.
Joe,
It appears so. Yes, Ann.
it was very clear to me in all the conversations that there's issues with the road paving. Are there issues with the sediment and erosion control too?
There is no evidence from town staff that that's the case. And in fact, the engineering department of Public Works was carbon copied on this memo, and you would have thought that they would have weighed in if there were such issues.
Can we call a bond for something that's been completed then?
I'm not sure.
Joe,
Joe,
Go ahead.
does this also mean that what we should be doing is calling for two bonds, each one at 7,000 for the total of 14?
Well, one was for the Meadow Farms, the other one was for Acorn Drive and Field Circle. Those are phase 1 and phase 2 specifically. Originally, we approved this subdivision as one entire project, then it got moved into two separate pieces. I don't know logistically if it makes any difference if we approve it separately, the two separate bonds.
Okay.
And go ahead.
do you have the total of what was the amount that we called previously? Because I'm looking at this summary sheet that was posted, and right now it shows a total bond remaining of $176,000 on the summary sheet. So this must have been prior to us calling the previous bond. This
Correct. You look at the
14,000
date of that, right?
Yeah, this 14 was included in this total. So that's why my question was, did we call enough that, or is there actually 14 remaining on the amount that we called?
Our action called any and all bonds. If you look at I'm calling up a memo that was bookmarked for us. And staff put together Judy put this together back in January. And there was a partial release of the E&S bond for phase 1 back in March of 2017. And the remaining balance is $7,000. And that's for Farms Road. Phase 2, which is Acorn Drive and Field Circle, there was a E&S bond. It was a partial release March of 2017, and the remaining value was $7,000. So the summation of those two phases equals the 14,000, which is referenced in the emails that we have. So that's how they came up with the 14,000. But
Yeah,
Ann,
I see that.
Ann raised a specific question though. Was the commission clear regarding any and all bonds that were available to release should be released? And I thought that that was the action the commission took last time.
Well, I guess it doesn't harm to clarify it one more time.
That's what staff is recommending. Alan, do you have anything to add on this matter? If you're speaking, you're on mute.
Sorry. So Alan Baker, Board of Selectmen. So yeah, I'm at a bit of a disadvantage because I didn't read this memo prior. And so I was just looking back at my notes and pulling up from the meeting where you did call the bond and seeing if it did include all bonds. But I mean, I agree so far with with what was said that, you know, it doesn't hurt to update it. But I'm just trying to catch up here and see if I agree that we've already done this or not.
Well, the town attorney has weighed in here and they're saying that there is no evidence. It wasn't clear. And staff is strongly recommending that we add that we consider a motion. So with that,
Yeah, I don't see a problem with that myself.
So with that, will someone be kind enough to offer a motion to call the 14,000 ENS bond remaining for Meadow Farms?
Would it, again, Joe, a question, would Meadow Farms also cover the Acorn Drive and Field Road?
I guess collectively, I'm calling Meadow Farms the entire project, but if, as the person making the motion could say phase 1 and phase 2, to be absolutely certain that we're talking about the entire project. Remember, one part was age restricted and the other one was single family residential.
I'll try this. I'll make a motion to, that we should call the erosion and sedimentation bonds for Meadow Farms and for Acorn Drive, for Meadow Farms phases 1 and 2 in the total of $14,000 to be called.
There's a motion on the table to call the 14,000 ENS bond for phases 1 and 2 of the Meadow Farms. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions or any objections? All right, passed unanimously. Thank you. Next up, new public hearings, text amendment to the East Windsor Planning and Zoning Regulations for alcohol sales. And normally Ruben would be here to help us, guide us through this process. He is unable to attend tonight's meeting. So we'll try to walk through this ourselves. We've had some of this information a couple weeks to go through it. But essentially in my opinion, what this all boils down to is that there's some conflicting views on how the regulations are written regarding alcohol, beverages and alcohol sales, and what the purpose of the language change is to rectify that. And this wording appears in many different sections of the regulations. And what Ruben did, or staff did, is go through page by page and made the necessary corrections or proposed changes. And part of the process under the state statutes requires to be sent to CROG for their review. CROG did review it, and they found no apparent conflicts with regional or the neighboring towns' regulations. So as far as CROG is concerned, they're okay with the proposed changes. So I don't know how the commission wants to go through this. Do we want to go through page by page? Or are there specific parts that we'd like to talk about or have a better understanding of the proposed language changes?
Well, I for one read these, and this is really just dotting a different I and crossing a different T. I didn't come up with anything that really changes the way that business would be done. It's just legalese, I guess.
If you do recall, the casino project, one of the sticking points was the language regarding alcohol sales and alcoholic beverages. And that kind of prompted this rewrite of the regulations to make it more clear or make it more understandable regarding the terminology used. So, okay.
I think
Frank?
it appears to me that it's done that. I don't know, but that's what it appears to me.
We'll just go around my little Hollywood squares here. Ann, do you have anything to add? Any comments, concerns? I can come back if you want a few more minutes.
I was reading it earlier this afternoon, and I can't find the same phraseology that I had found this afternoon. But there, as I recall, there was a sentence specific to, I want to call it, recreational venues, including casinos. And as I read that sentence, I then started to think, what other recreational venues might it apply to? So I was thinking the sports bubble. But if the process is to get a liquor license, you still need to go through liquor control and you have to handle it in accordance with the law. I guess I don't have a problem with the selling of liquor at recreational facilities, but I didn't know if it just became, I'll say, because it's in the regs, a blanket approval and no opportunity for further comment and assuring that for a youth population, it's appropriate.
Just because there's language in these regs does not enable an applicant or a business to automatically assume that it's approved. You have to make a specific application for this approval. We have that authority.
I guess that's what was important to me, because I didn't know that. I thought alcohol sales should happen at the Reservoir Park, or I don't know enough about the clientele of the sports dome to know if it would be appropriate or not. But that's what I cared about, is there was still process to assure it was appropriate, not just zoning.
Correct. Mike, did you have any comments, concerns?
Yeah. And do you have the reg in front of you? The
I do.
amended one?
I do.
I think, are you referring to 504.7?
Yes.
It says building and premises used for hotels, conference centers, casinos, and restaurants. It doesn't mention sporting venues.
I think what Ann may be referring to is catering establishment, commercial, recreational. Maybe that's what she was getting at, that wording. How is commercial recreational defined?
That's exactly the wording that was bothering me.
To me, I would understand commercial recreational as it's for profit.
Which the sports bubble is, right?
Yes.
I'm sure, this is Frank, I'm sure the town attorneys have gone through this. Well, I assume they have. I hope they have. And they must appear to be okay with it.
Not sure, Frank.
Jason's not on board. Too bad we couldn't speak to him about this because this was his baby.
Well, the town is sponsoring these changes.
Yeah.
So Jason signed the application. You would thought that he would have been advised of this proposed changes that the first selectman's office is sponsoring.
Exactly. I agree. Exactly.
And another thing, it has a positive referral from CROG, which is huge.
Take the CROG comment as more about, does it impact any surrounding towns?
You're right. Exactly, Ian. Or in conflict with surrounding towns' rules and regulations, as well as the regional plan.
Okay.
Not regarding whether or not it's appropriate or not. It's
Right.
regarding in conflict. That's what they're looking for. Looking out for everybody else.
So what do we do?
No liquor sales, no casino.
Oh, I think it's totally appropriate for the casino. It fits with that business.
And I agree with Joe's statement that even though it's in the reg, nothing becomes automatic.
I recall a while back when the Sports Dome, we had to go through a reapproval process after the tornado kind of did some major damage to that. And they had proposed a daycare facility and some outdoor space and outdoor athletic fields we approved. There's also conversation regarding alcohol sales. And they just thought that they could do it, but they never put it in their application. And we didn't consider it. And ultimately, they didn't think that was really a good fit for their business model at that time. But and not to say that they can't change their business model. Like you go out or some other sports domes, to take for example, like a tennis club in Glastonbury. They have areas where they do allow liquor sales. I'm sure there are other ones around too.
No, I think it could be done in a way that's appropriate. I just don't know enough about how that sports dome is set up in East Windsor.
I think that maybe you can compare it to in South Windsor. There are the two video game and whatnot establishments there, and they serve alcohol, but it's in almost a separate unit of the building.
Mm-hmm.
And we would have the right anyways to, or I believe that we would have the right, if somebody came in and had a dual use or a multi-age area in liquor sales, we could decide to, even if we said yes, we could mandate that be in a separate area.
That
Correct.
would work.
Yeah.
That would work.
And above and beyond that, even though the commission may say yes to an application and approve it, they are subject to the Liquor Control Commission rules and regulations, whatever they may be, regarding licensing and certain provisions, make sure that minors are not served, those type of things.
As another example, the Oakwood Soccer Club dome in Glastonbury also has a food and drink area, and they serve beer. And it's popular with them, and I'm sure they have to go through everything that a restaurant that serves beer would have to go through.
Marty, we haven't heard from you. Do you have anything to add to the conversation?
Marty, you're on mute.
It's okay if you don't. Just want to make sure we're all inclusive, that's all. So,
Hold on. Okay, I found it. I found the button. Okay. No, I'm okay.
okay. So getting back to the initial question I had, is there a need for us to go take this line by line? Or were those, we've all had an opportunity in advance to look at these. We're not looking at these for the first time. We shouldn't be looking at these for the first time. Are we ready to consider public comment if there are any out there? And consider moving forward, or we want to go through this line by line?
This is Frank. I'm in favor of moving forward. I've read it, and I don't think there's much we can add or delete.
I am also in favor of that.
Joe, the only thing I don't see is that we usually get a draft of what a proposal would look like. So are we going to be, again, wordsmithing on the fly?
We are.
I agree with moving forward.
All right, so this is a public hearing. Is there anyone out in the audience that would like to have comments on the proposed zone change? Yes.
Terry Hahn, LADA. I just bring to your attention the stuff that we're talking about with respect to Warehouse Point and the discussion of commercial recreation. One of the things that we are noting in our proposed regulation changes that we do need a definition of commercial recreation. So that would in fact include the sports dome. So just tying things together.
Thanks, Terry, for that clarification, that input. Is there anyone else out there who have any comments regarding the proposed text amendment for alcohol sales?
Alan?
Yes, Alan.
Alan Baker, Rye Street. I was looking through the text amendment, and also this, if I understand it correctly, would be a special use permit anyway, right? Any new thing. So you guys would be able to kind of shape what you were looking for in any area anyway.
Absolutely correct. It is not as of right.
Okay. And I think it's a good ad. I think there's other applications besides this one that might benefit.
Understood. I'll assume that there's no other comments in the audience. So one thing I will add is need to go through this for the record anyway. Ruben put together, I'm trying to find my notes, here they are. Put together some ideas of how it's consistent with the plan of conservation and development, and it is not in conflict with the plan of conservation and development. So it checks that box. And he had some other work. I mean, he had some other ideas on page 4 of the of his memo. He had about 5 bullet points. One of them was when on the onset, I indicated basically this is just, the purpose of this is just to clear up some conflicting views regarding the language regarding alcohol sales. That's really the driving force behind this. So with that, we need to close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman?
Joe,
Yes.
Joe, this is Frank. Jason's back with us. Perhaps he can fill us in terms of our legal status and how it was gone over, and make sure all the language is correct.
So this is Jason. I'm with the Board of Selectmen. And I'm sorry to do that, guys, but I'm supposed to identify myself every time about my meeting. So we did get the copy before you I think it's supposed to have a 500-foot separating distance between places that sell alcohol and places that worship in convalescent homes. Is that the draft that you have, or was there a mix-up?
That's the one we have.
Okay. So I'm sorry, Frank, what was your specific question?
Well, I guess my question really is, Jason, is this has all gone over by the town attorneys and everything has been approved.
It's been reviewed by 2 attorneys at Pullman and Connolly, and I believe also it's approved by CROG. I'm 98% certain that that's.
Well, CROG, if this is Frank, CROG is not as important as our town attorneys.
Yeah.
Well, legally, you do need CROG's approval, though.
We have absolutely had legal review representing the town taking a look at this.
Thank you.
So with that, we can still continue our conversation, but we need to close the public hearing, though. So will someone kindly offer a motion to close the public hearing? So you can, someone can craft a motion from the agenda. It's as simple as that. Item 9 on the agenda.
So first, you need a motion to close the public hearing for the text amendment to East Windsor zoning regulation, PZ 2020-02 of the East Windsor Planning and Zoning Commission for the text amendment of East Windsor zoning regulation regarding alcohol sales.
There's a motion to close the public hearing for text amendment to the East Windsor Planning and Zoning Regulations for alcohol sales. Is there a second?
This is Frank. I second it.
So there's a motion made. It's been seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, I call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Joe
Aye.
Burlett.
Aye, Richard Sullivan.
Aye, Frank Gowdy.
I'm
Hi,
Mike
Jim
Walker.
Thurs.
And that makes 5, so that's a unanimous approval. Okay, so now we have to take action on this. And I'm thinking that the motion of approval will go very similar to as what was offered to close the public hearing. However, I would make a motion or some sort of tie it with some sort of connection to the memorandum that Ruben made to the Planning and Zoning Commission, which kind of outlines all the changes. That's
Okay.
also part of the attached documents that were on the town website.
Okay, I do see that. So it's only really page listed. The first one doesn't have a page number, but I would have to just assume it is page 1 and page 2.
Actually, it's a 4-page document. It's dated March 6, 2020. It's from Ruben to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, because the one that's uploaded is a March 3rd document. That's the one that's on the website.
Okay, so the latest one is not up there. Let's see if I can find it buried within all these documents here. Now, the March 3rd document making reference to is Ruben's transmittal to CROG.
The one that I pulled up is titled Public Hearing PZC Text Amendment to Zoning Regulations, reference alcohol sales. That's the one that I pulled up.
Mike has a green sticky in the right-hand corner.
I'm on the website off my phone here, so that's where I'm pulling it from.
Yeah, this is where it's a little awkward not having professional staff here to help us guide through this process, because official motion was not made. Historically, he would have prepared a memo for us for approval. We'll
Yeah,
get through this.
Joe, he's been out since Wednesday of last week, and I was under the impression he'd be on the call tonight. Not really sure why he isn't. He hasn't been in the office in.
Okay, well, we can get through this regardless.
Yeah, I don't have the latest one available to me, so I won't make the motion then.
Well, let me try to phrase it in this way. We're offer some suggestions. So essentially, we can craft a motion very similar to what's on the agenda for approval of the language. We just make reference to the changes that are in the CROG memo. That highlights them all, because there's nothing different. Whatever was sent to CROG is the exact same changes that we're considering for approval tonight. There are no changes.
Okay. The CROG, what's posted on the website is the CROG comments. I don't
Nope.
see anything.
No, it's not. I don't. No. I don't think you're. I'm on the town website, and it is not the CROG comments. It's a memo from Ruben to Lynn Pike DeSanto, dated March 3rd, 2020. I can't be the only one seeing this.
Joe and Mike, would you like me to take a crack at it, and then Mike or somebody else can reiterate what I said, if that would help get it going? I can't make the motion because I'm just an alternate.
Frank,
if you're talking, you're on mute.
Yeah, and we can get your input and paraphrase it. I mean, you
That's
don't
correct, right.
you're not making a motion. You're just adding to the conversation, which we're probably going to copy.
Okay, here goes. A motion could be something like to approve the proposed text amendment to the East Windsor zoning regulations, PZ 2020-02, as indicated in the packages for the Planning and Zoning Commission for tonight's meeting, and referencing the March 6, 2020 memo from Ruben Flores Marzan, sorry if I butchered his name, town planner, that recommends adoption of this motion, notes that CROG has reviewed and approved the proposed regulation change, and notes that the regulation is in conformance with the Plan of Conservation and Development, and the impact of this regulation change is to make the town zoning regulations easier to interpret, clearer, more concise, and easier to implement by the town.
This March 6 document that Ann's referencing was a handout at a prior meeting and unfortunately was not uploaded to the website.
It's a 4-page document.
I don't have it. I don't have it.
You don't have the handout from the last face-to-face meeting that we had.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
He wants to.
that sounded like your PhD dissertation.
I just looked at the documents and talked.
Thank you for trying. And I think if Mike
That's
can
the kindness of Jason to give me the documents.
if Mike can paraphrase that, he's doing real well.
Well, he can just say he's adopting what I said if he would like. It's recorded, so.
Okay. Let's give it a shot then. I make a motion that we approve the text amendment to East Windsor zoning regulation PZ 2020-02 in regards to alcohol sales, adapting the recommendations listed on the memo dated March 23rd, correct?
March 6th.
I'm sorry, March 6th, from Ruben Flores Marzan, referencing the lines and notations of where the text amendment should be noted and amended.
There's a motion on the table for approval, the text amendment to the zoning regulations for alcohol sales. Is there a second?
Frank Gowdy, I'll second that.
Is there any discussion, comments? Hearing none, I call for a vote. All those in favor say aye. Joe Willett,
Richard Sullivan?
Frank Gowdy, favor, yes.
Jim,
Mike Kowalski, yes.
that's unanimous, that's 5. The text amendment is approved. Very good. Next up under new business, to consider acceptance of zoning applications electronically as per the governor's executive orders pertaining to the COVID-19 pandemic. Jay, you want to offer just a very brief explanation of what's happening?
Sure. So this is Jason from the Board of Selectmen. The governor has been issuing, or it slowed down a little bit, but on a near daily basis, he's been issuing executive orders which offer guidance or directives for how to navigate these COVID-19 times. Those have included restrictions on public gatherings, social distancing, private business operations, government function, municipal government function. And as municipalities try and navigate this the new circumstances that we're under, the governor has seen fit to relax a number of statutory restrictions that typically govern how our processes work. So one of those restrictions in, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's section 19 of Executive Order 7I. It might be section 16 of 7I, but that allows for the electronic submission of planning and zoning applications to be accepted. A number of the additional flexibility options that have been granted under the executive order are at the discretion of either the municipal CEO or the legislative body, which is deemed to be, in our case, the Board of Selectmen. This is an exception to that. In order for the town to accept applications electronically, it's the head of the land use board that needs to adopt that provision of that executive order. And so that's why I asked for it to be on the agenda tonight. It's still important, not just for our community and for what we're trying to do, but also for the state of Connecticut, that we try and keep economic activity moving along at whatever capacity it's going to be able to in the new future. So certainly with the town hall being closed to the general public, it's more difficult for us to accept hard copy submissions. We're even trying to get a new balance between FedEx, UPS, and the US Mail in terms of how to get those deliveries that we need to get without letting anybody into the building. So I think certainly recognizing that we're in the 21st century and that these are hopefully fleeting but unheard of circumstances, you guys might consider adopting that provision of the executive order so that we can try and move things continually along.
Thank you very much, Jay. I certainly am in favor of it, and I'm hoping that my fellow colleagues are also. Is there any comments out there? We should probably take a formal vote, but any initial feedback before we do that?
Jim Thayer's here. For building permits, we always do them online. We never go into the building department anymore. It just streamlines everything. and the process still has to go forward. It's just getting your application in online.
Right. We're also converting over to a new software platform with a target date of July 1, so that it will be more electronically interactive, which we're hoping will add to the customer service experience that I think should be at a high premium, and that so applicants will be able to see at what stage of the approval process their applications are, whether it's a zoning issue, whether it's before zoning or before the building official or WPCA or the town engineer or wherever, rather than have people have to wander around trying to figure out where their application is currently sitting. They'll be able to access this forward-facing platform that would allow more transparency and hopefully allow business to run a bit smoother.
I agree.
This is Ann. I think it's a great idea. I'm really glad to see the town doing it. I would love to see it done for the zoning applications too. The one thing that always strikes me as difficult, and probably isn't for somebody with better computer skills than I have, is how you upload big maps and drawings. But if people can figure out how to PDF them and upload them, that's great.
Mike?
Yeah, Jason, when I saw this, I'm like, what is the downfall of why wouldn't you want to have it electronically? And the only thing I could think of was maybe proof of ownership. But realistically, I mean, if somebody tried to submit in a false application against someone else, I don't think you'll get very far, up to maybe the point of getting it on a meeting agenda. That's about as far as it would get.
I guess what could happen, Mike, it could be sent electronically to an unmonitored mailbox. Hey, I submitted electronically in such and such date. I didn't get any reply. I just assumed that the town got it. And let's take, for example, that mailbox went unattended to for weeks.
So there should be a that it's going to be required a return receipt or something to that effect.
That's more internal town processes to worry about. I'm sure Jay and his staff have figured all that stuff out. This is just to allow the electronic acceptance of plans. How the rest of the process flows is really none of our business.
One other good point is you get paid right away. Like we pull permits for the town of Enfield. We pull a building permit. They make you pay by credit card right then and there on the spot. So you get your money instantly.
This is Frank. It's a no-brainer for me. It's a go.
Dick, any comments? You're talking, you're on mute.
Yeah, you forgot that mute button, Mike. Richard.
Oh, you're still on mute.
Well, I'll jump in. I'm
Go ahead,
agreeing
Matt.
with the methods that are
Okay.
projected, but I agree with the mapping situation
Yeah,
that Ann mentioned.
and
Thanks,
I think the mapping situation could be difficult, but what else? What other problems do we have? I think it's a good idea.
Dick,
Yeah,
did you get some technical assistance?
Yes, I did.
Good for you.
I feel that in this time, I mean, you've got to do things which are, in a sense, unorthodox as to the way things were normally done. This is kind of becoming the new normal right now. You can't stop all business. We've got to keep going.
My only question, I fully support it, as I said earlier, but my one question I have is for Jason, is what happens after the governor's executive order expires? Do we go back to the old way of doing it? Let's say we take action and we do support it.
Right.
Does it default back to the old process, or does our new approval establish a way moving forward?
Good question. Good question.
Well, the statute isn't changing. The statute's just being suspended. So when
Okay, yeah.
emergency declaration is over, it'll revert back to standing language. But one of the things that I can tell you I'm seeing just in my interaction with staff is that if there's an upside to this COVID experience, it is that we are finding more efficient way of doing things than we have in the past. And I think some of those things may continue. For example, I have staff located in 5 different locations. And when I have my senior staff meeting tomorrow morning, typically I would aggregate them all into town hall and we'd meet around the meeting. Well, the way we've been doing it is over a Zoom platform now, and that actually is working just as well. So there are some adaptations that we've made that might stick around afterwards. And I think that my hope is that the legislature recognizes that if there are things that are working in a different, more efficient way, then they'll adopt those as well. I think, quite honestly, I think the next legislative session is going to be a really interesting one up in that place. I think there's going to be some pretty significant reforms that take place. Hopefully this will be one of them if it works. And if it doesn't work, then we go back to the old way. But the point is, I think it's important that we try and keep economic activity moving wherever we can.
So I don't want to beat this up too much, but I think I'm recommending that we offer a motion so we have a unified front on this. And we could probably craft a motion from the agenda under the new business item.
Okay, I guess.
Willing to do that?
Got it. Sure. Am I? Okay, I'm not muted. Okay. I make a motion that we accept zoning applications electronically as per the governor's executive order pertaining to the COVID-19 pandemic.
There's a motion on the table to accept zoning applications electronically. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Call for approval. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Joe
Aye.
Willett.
Aye, Richard Sullivan.
Aye, Frank Gowdy.
Aye, Jim Thurs.
I'm Mike Polsky.
5, that does it. Thank you. Unanimous. Next up on the agenda, old business. We're going to skip site visits. Staff is not here to walk us through that.
Oh,
B, continue discussion regarding Warehouse Point planning study to include Terry Hahn of LADA PC Land Planners.
Evening, guys. This is Terry Hahn, Principal, LADA PC Land Planners. Jason, I have a quick question for you. The shared screen thing is disabled.
I can fix that. Give me a second.
Okay. Because otherwise I would have to refer to the plans on the website. So it's up to you.
You should be good to go now.
Yes, yes, I am. Let's see. What happened to the? Oh, excuse me. A few technical difficulties at the moment. Sorry. For some reason, it's just not letting me get to Dropbox. So. See if this works.
Well, Terry, as an option, all your 10 documents 11 documents were uploaded to the town website.
Right. Yes, and we can use that if this does not work. Let me just, should be there, but let's just make sure. Okay, let's see if this will let me. No, for some reason it is not allowing me to connect to Dropbox today. Oh, wait a minute. Yes, it is. Sorry. There we go. Oops. Hang on. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Let's see if we can do this. Whew. Okay, it worked. Everybody in? Can you all see the plan?
Yep, I see it.
Yep,
Yes.
yes.
Great. Okay. All right, so let's start at the beginning. So this is the ongoing discussion regarding the Warehouse Point Stormwater Management and Planning Study that is being funded by DECD. We are heading towards the end of this discussion, so there's a few things that are still outstanding that I need to get the sort of final feedback on. So we have, I believe it's 11 items that are linked in with the and posted on the East Windsor website. So audience or anybody else who's listening and doesn't have screen share, we're doing these in order. So file number 1 is the future use and density plan. As we discussed at the last meeting, I was looking for some feedback with respect to 2 of the new zones that we're looking at, which was the Warehouse Point Commercial Recreation Area. And clearly from your discussion earlier, the definition of commercial recreation is going to become important because whatever we use here, it would be applicable elsewhere in town. And then also for the highway area with respect to any limitations, restrictions, what you were trying to do. So I'm going to need some feedback from you guys on that.
Terry, this is Joe. Did the highway area change shape a little bit?
It did because we included the cloverleaf.
Okay.
Okay. Yep.
So Terry, you're soliciting comments now. This is,
Yes, please. This is the time to, give me any feedback, or if you're not prepared to do so, I would ask that you put something down and either get it between now and the next meeting so that I can put it on the drawing and you can review it for what will be the sort of last time before we go to public. And then, or you could just give them to me next time. It'll just take me one more step.
Okay, well, I guess I'll start with a comment. We already defined a highway interchange zone along when we were doing the Route 5 portion. Why wouldn't we just parallel this with what we've already established for a highway interchange zone for this highway area?
Well, I think the reason why it was something different, because originally it was the highway, we had it as a repeat of the highway intersection zone. It was sort of an extension of that from Route 5, but then we made it in our discussions on this previously, we made it a separate Warehouse Point highway zone in case you wanted it to be, because there was some discussion as to whether you wanted it to somehow be unique to Warehouse Point, or is it simply an intrusion of the highway zone into Warehouse Point? You guys need to tell me which way you want to go.
My opinion would be, as long as you made most of it by special use permit, then we have the final say in what ends up there.
Mike, I'm going to offer a slightly different perspective. Regarding the zone on the other side of 91, outside these study limits, we listed or identified a lot of different type of businesses and land uses that we'd like to see, one of which being the casino and all the other ones. But that really had high visibility from the interstate because it was elevated from I-91. This However, this is down, this doesn't share, these characteristics are somewhat unique. They're not as visible from I-91 as they are on the other side of the highway. So I think what we're trying to do is promote businesses that are very accessible, not accessible, but very visible from the highway on the other side, not necessarily on this side. I don't know if that matters at all, but.
I think one of the benefits to having a separate zone is that you can, in fact, change or expand or do things different from your permitted and prohibited uses. Because, for example, you have in the section 504, which is the highway zone, you prohibited, a drive-through is prohibited. And so that would mean that in that area, you wouldn't be able to have a drive-through where maybe you do want a drive-through in this area. I'm just throwing that out as an example. It's not necessarily a good one, but that's, I'm just throwing that out there. So it gives you an opportunity to really look at those allowed and prohibited uses and make them different.
Does anyone else have a different perspective than what's already been discussed regarding what to do with this highway area?
Joe, this is Marty. The only thing that I see is now that the new normal is going to be a lot different as far as people's comfort zone in crowded spaces and actually attending, going into a building. I think drive-throughs, people may want less people contact. That needs to be left kind of, a possibility where there's a drive-through pickup service.
So as proposed right now, that flexibility does exist within the highway area. If we were to mirror what's on the east side of I-91, that flexibility would not exist in the highway area.
Right. So I think that this is a separate circumstance because it's also, like you said, the terrain and everything else, that location is a bit more unique.
Well, Terry, I think we have a lot of bashful people here where we're just saving our comments to share with you later. I guess it remains as is, unless we hear otherwise.
And remaining as is in terms
As
of?
shown. As shown.
As shown, okay, so it'd be a
As
separate use.
Yeah.
Okay, a separate zone, okay, all right.
No, I'm totally in favor of it being a separate zone. I thought we were just more talking about what uses would be allowed in that zone.
I agree with Mike. As shown, I think it's fine. I think it's great.
What do you guys think about the drive-through? Is that something that should be allowed in this area?
This is Frank. Yes, I do.
I'm not opposed to drive-throughs. As long as a traffic study can support it.
Okay, we'll note that a traffic study will be required. Okay. That's the kind of stuff I need to know, so we can put that in there. Okay. Anybody else have any other thoughts on this one?
My only concern is regarding the Warehouse Point commercial recreational area. What would happen? Well, what would another fit for that land if the sports dome were not to exist in the future?
At the moment, I'm putting in, I think what we have here is an office, potentially. It's a big flat area. There are other recreation uses that are possible. But you could also, if, let's say the sports dome disappears, you can also rezone this.
Okay.
Okay, so am I thinking of this, it's supposed to be like a commercial / recreational or commercial recreational?
The way it's written right now, it's commercial recreation. So that anything that would be recreation use, the for profit, basically, is what commercial recreation typically is. So it could be a roller rink. It could be
Go-kart track.
I'm sorry.
Go-kart track.
Yeah.
With alcohol, because we just got that straight.
We like that.
Now you're talking.
We don't have any axe throwing in town.
Have your
Oh
own.
boy.
There's one in Enfield.
All right,
Well-
Terry, I think you can move on.
Okay. Sounds good. So then item number 2. Let me get to the. So how I got this. So from the future use and density plan is the zoning, the actual zoning layout and map. This is similar and it's sort of spawned from that first map. Doesn't have as much detail. It was really just looking at how those zones might lay out. We had, in this one, the difference here is that we're changing, we included it all the way out to the Cloverleaf where the previous zoning map did not. One of the things that's important about this one is that the Bridge Street, the Warehouse Point Bridge Street mixed use zone comes up the hill of Bridge Street opposite in this area here, opposite the children's home, and includes all those farmhouses on Bridge Street, including the one that you recently did rezoning for. So, and that zone goes back a certain distance beyond the property lines, and then is engaged in a slightly different use component and density levels in the rear, which is the Warehouse Point commercial zone. So it's a different, it's a stepped process, so that as you go away from Bridge Street, you have density at Bridge Street with certain requirements for streetscapes, leaving the houses a street line, and then allow for taller buildings, a slightly heavier use, not so much density, but a heavier use to the rear of those properties, if that makes sense. Does anyone have any comments on this map?
No, looks good.
This is Frank. It looks good to me.
Anybody else? Shall we move on?
It's and I think it's totally consistent with what we've been talking about.
Okay. Everybody else good?
Yes.
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 All right, I'm going to keep moving. So we'll move to item number 3, which is the image. One of the things we've been talking about is on South Water Street. What would happen if the buildings were lifted up out of the flood zone? We're using the road generally as at elevation 30. The flood zone is considered to be somewhere around 35 to 36, depending on where you're at. You need to be 1 or 2 feet above that. So a nice 8-foot, we're using an 8-foot raised up, basically a floor in this image, and showing how the houses could be reconfigured and what they might look like. We lifted them up and we also pushed them back approximately 10 to 15 feet off the property line, because the property lines are sitting right very close to the road edge, to allow for some configuration there on the road, to allow for a sidewalk and also a bike lane on the river side. Anyone have any comments on this image?
Out of
Looks very nice.
How come the dwelling unit on the corner there, the pale greenhouse, didn't get a makeover?
I honestly, I did it for contrast.
Yes.
That's actually the existing house that's there.
Yes, that is correct.
It's a good contrast also. It shows what the elevation would look like.
Now, one of the things that we did talk about was going potentially 3 stories above the elevated floor. And as we were doing that, I started to get nervous because if you made those 2 stories 10 feet, you know, you can make a full story, you can make it into a dormer, but once you get to that 3rd story up above, you're in the almost in excess of 40 feet above the ground level. And based on the feedback that we've had in the past, I figured that was going to trigger those resounding no issues. So my thought process at this point is a recommendation of a maximum height of probably 45 feet, including the elevated portion of the building.
Terry, can you help me orient me on the riverside? Is the riverside where the cyclist is when near the stop sign, or the other side?
The riverside is where the cyclist is.
Okay.
And then the land goes about as, just from a proportional perspective, about as far from the cyclist to the left of this image, about twice the distance, or no, about the same distance as from the cyclist to the new building elevations. And then there's the stream bank and then the river.
Gotcha.
So if you were to consider dwelling units higher than 40 feet, so you're talking about a 3rd story, that potentially could block vistas from the houses where the units behind it, the parallel street.
That's
Which is
correct.
which is Dean Avenue?
It could, on Dean, it could potentially cause a problem there. Right now, there's fairly dense vegetation. So if they're getting any kind of a view, it's from some view up on the 2nd story windows of some kind. But I just think from a density perspective, let's just put it this way. From how big the building feels, if you add another story on top of this, it will start to feel gigantic. However, let's say that's the way you want to go, because now instead of there being 2 units, you know, one on top of one another, you want to get the revenue from a 3rd unit, then it certainly can go taller. I just thought this was consistent with how everyone has sort of responded to building height. And it is significantly higher. It's a good 8 feet higher than any of the buildings are now. It's probably between 8 and 15 feet higher than any of the buildings are now.
This is Joe. I like it the way you've shown it.
This is Frank. I like the way you're showing it right now.
Yeah, this is Dick. I very much like the way that you're showing it. You've taken what is not the best aspect of town and turned it into a nice neighborhood.
Except the BB holes in the stop sign,
Right.
which is, the graphics are unbelievable because that's the existing trees and stop signs, and that little house in the corner is exactly the way it looks.
Yeah, we use a graphic style that superimposes the perspective into existing photos, so we always know where we're at.
Terry, one question for you. This is Marty. On when you set back the houses, how does that impact their rear yard and any other situation, or how? I mean, this is.
That's a good question. One of the reasons why I only set it back 10 to 15 feet was because the idea here is that you don't want the cars parking in the front yard. You want the cars to be able to travel either along the side of the house or under the house and park in the rear. So these units are actually, the lots in this area are fairly deep. If you look on any of the previous maps, you'll see how close the buildings are to the road. So they do have a fairly significant amount of land to the rear that is probably not currently being used, that will now become a parking lot and, much more heavily used than what it currently is.
Okay, great. I like the look of it.
This is Joe. If the houses were moved closer to the street line, would they have to be elevated even higher because you need to make up room for the flood zone?
The reason why I push them back is because what you don't see in this image is what the existing South Water Street is. South Water Street is only 20 feet wide. In some places it's skinnier than that. What we're showing here is a 24-foot wide road plus a 3-foot grass strip plus a 5-foot sidewalk. And I need to be able to push the road wider in order to be able to do that, because the property lines are so close that I'm actually taking property here.
Okay.
So Terry, are those utility poles in the existing location, or did you move those also?
No, those are in the existing locations.
Okay, so then it would fit as drawn.
Right.
Very good.
Okay, any other thoughts on this one? Can we move on?
Yes.
Yes, move on.
Yes.
Okay. So we're moving on to the image number 4. This is a phase 1 element. This was a discussion with Ruben, who was having discussions with Jen Rodriguez from Windsor Locks, and some what they want to call phase 1 improvements to get people walking and to sort of look at how this intersection is set up. We're looking at a painted crosswalk where we just using the red, white, and blue stars for the crosswalks, maybe a painted town seal in the middle of the intersection, just to sort of liven it up, make it more interesting. Look at ornamental lights, some planters that would be set on the sidewalk. These are relatively small because the sidewalk is not huge in these locations, as well as the dedicated bike lane coming from Windsor Locks that would take the bicyclists down South Water Street to what will now be a new crosswalk, which is further down the hill on South Water Street. So you wouldn't make the crossing at the actual intersection, but further down the hill. So this was something that he was looking for to see if East Windsor and Windsor Locks could apply for some grants to get some money to just sort of start thinking about getting people walking across the bridge.
So Terry, so there's a pedestrian or cyclist walkway going over the river.
Mm-hmm.
They're separated, looks like some concrete barrier. And they're going to be crossing on, South Water Street?
Yeah, they'll come down South Water Street because the sidewalk and the bike lane will come down South Water Street this way. And then over in this area over here off the picture, because the land drops fairly substantially, goes down, and when it hits the flats, then there's a crosswalk so the pedestrians and the bicyclists could, not on a bicycle, but cross over to South Water Street and then back up to Bridge Street. Or the idea is that this dedicated lane would continue off the pavement on its own lane, similar to what we saw in the previous image.
This is more of a fine detail, but there's some problems with that working. Let's say that you're going to cross. Can you move your cursor a little bit down South Water Street? So there's a stop line over there for the traffic light, and you're going to have vehicles stop behind that line.
Yes.
Is the crosswalk going to be in front of that line or behind that line?
It's going to be far to the left.
So you're going to have stopped vehicles at the traffic light, and you're going to have pedestrians and cyclists crossing between stopped vehicles, stacked up at the light, waiting for the light to turn green?
No, that's a reasonable comment. And so where the actual location of that crosswalk would be probably, it's
A couple
possible.
hundred feet down the road.
It could be quite a distance down the
Oh,
road.
okay, okay.
Yes,
No problem.
absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely. Yeah, because you don't, it has to make sense, you know, for stacking. You know, it could be halfway down the block between Bridge Street and, what is that, the School Street. Could be halfway down that block.
Okay.
That hill doesn't level out for a while.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts or questions on this image?
And the last comment I have is this the side of the road where we want pedestrians to cross? Now, I know that's the side of the bridge where the sidewalk is. So that's the plan from the Windsor Locks perspective, is to keep the sidewalk there on that side of the bridge?
That's my understanding, yes. The
Okay.
idea of the dedicated bike lane actually came out of their traffic studies that they were working on, you know, before the rotary, but the rotary's been rejected. And so this is kind of one of the remnant discussions there that everyone seems to like.
Okay. I think it has a lot of merit moving forward.
Everyone ready to move on?
Let's
Yep.
go.
Yeah, I'm good.
Let's go.
I don't want to talk forever tonight. Okay. So moving into the phase 2 development ideas, we have 3 different options that we've looked at for the section between on Bridge Street, between South Water Street and the co-op building on Bridge Street. That we've looked at a couple of different ways, and I've included all of them in this series. So we have 3 options. The first one is if there were no property lines, it was a unified plan, and we were able to sort of get that whole strip all together. They would look like individual buildings, which is similar to what we have had images in the past, but it just would be all sort of one larger scale development. The idea here is that the main entrance would be actually past. There's an existing driveway system that starts past Dean on Bridge Street, and then the other entrance would be from North Water Street. If we can get away with it, I'd love to have a right turn in and out. It seems unlikely, but you know, I'm just trying to show what we might be able to do. Maybe there's a different building there, maybe that's extended, but just some options as to what this might look like. In this one, I didn't push the parking particularly far, but this is sort of much more consistent with the images that we previously showed in the earlier study. Anyone have any thoughts on this one, this plan?
Terry, this is Joe. I think this one probably be very difficult to implement because of the different property lines associated with that.
Agreed.
So this would be a conglomeration where that's not the right word, where a aggregation of all the properties for a newer development.
Absolutely,
To me, this is the cleanest look.
Right.
I love to see this from access management point of view, from aesthetic point of view, but regarding getting all the property owners to agree or sell, maybe difficult. But here again, this is a vision for the future.
Exactly.
Yeah, so this would be considered the large scale development.
Yeah, I think, you know, it would require someone who had the funding and who had control of all these properties in order to pull this off.
it probably would not happen organically, one building at a time.
This is specifically not a one building at a time plan.
But some of the other options are.
Correct. That's
Okay.
that's the next one. The next
Okay.
two,
Yep.
actually. So
Is anyone opposed to this idea? Forget about who owns what and where the property lines are and the need for parking. Is anyone not like this concept?
This is Frank. I like the concept, but I don't see it happening in my lifetime. But of course, I'm 80 years old, so.
I mean, if this were a blank, empty lot, this would be the ideal situation.
mhm.
But the implementation of it is the most difficult.
Does anyone else have a different perspective that does not like this at all? Okay, you can probably move on, Terry.
Okay. So from a more practical perspective, we're going to end up with one of these other options. So the next one was the one that Joe mentioned at the last time. We were unlikely to get this access point, but this one is most true to the property lines. So each of these property lines, one here, the access that goes back into this building back here, they can all be constructed within the existing, there's another one over here, within the existing property lines. So that's sort of the benefit of this particular plan. I've utterly respected the property line. So if it really does happen, building by building, piece by piece, you would end up with something that looked like this.
To me, it's not that bad other than the access issues and the additional congestion and turning conflicts on Bridge Street, but I could live with it if it wasn't for the traffic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you took that existing one that has the rear access to that existing home and made it an entrance only, I don't think it would cause any adverse effects on traffic.
It would obviously be subject to review by DOT. This is just, I think it's 250 feet back from here, which is just a little bit tight from those standards. But like I said, it's these people, the people for the access on the property back here have a strip of land that would be their curb cut. So I would sort of doubt that they would want to give that up if there wasn't a other reasonable option. But this kind of gives you an image of what is possible.
Moving forward, when we get to the point where publishing this plan, is it unreasonable to have these options, make a near-term option, long-term or middle-term? Having many of the, well, not many, I mean, you've come up with 3 alternatives. Is that out of the question?
No, I think the intent of the report is to provide, guidance, and that I think options actually give you quite a bit more flexibility. We're not creating a form-based code, but certainly including these images within the code itself gives somebody an idea of what you were looking for.
Okay.
Anyone have any other questions on this one?
This is Frank. One of the drawbacks of this Zoom is it's difficult to see that map as clearly as if I had it in front of me.
I apologize. I can.
No, it's not your fault. It's my fault.
I can get you more clear. Does that help?
Oh, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can
Right, Richard? Right, Richard?
Absolutely.
Sorry
So,
about that. Feel free to
Terry,
speak over that.
this is Joe. These two concept plans that you showed us, would this rely on shared parking requirements?
Yes.
Okay.
One of the criteria for this to be successful is that you have to share parking. So one of the elements that goes into this zone, the Bridge Street mixed use zone, is statements that say things like shared parking is encouraged, and we're going to have to come up with a way to calculate the required parking spaces, even if they're not on your property. One of the real difficulties of this whole idea, even if the buildings are developed on a property by property basis, is to get people to build. Like, for example, this property went first. It doesn't have any way to access the parking behind it. So there has to be some group effort here in order to get an image like this, okay? Because these guys are giving up their existing curb cuts in order to make this happen. So you have to be able to give them something in return. The difficulty is, one of the things I was just thinking about is typically in a scenario where you have required shared spaces is there's a couple things that can happen. The town can decide that it will control these parking spaces via a municipal parking ordinance. And then the town takes the responsibility for having the insurance, but the tenants and the property owners deal with all the maintenance. So there's ways to do it, but it's quite a bit more creative than what typically occurs in East Windsor at this time. But an urban center like Warehouse Point, this would be fairly typical. This would be like going in the back of the parking lots on Farmington Avenue in West Hartford, where they had all those shared parking spaces. Anyone have any other thoughts on this? Does anyone hate this?
I don't hate it, but you're absolutely correct in that it needs either a lot of cooperation or for one person to come in and start from scratch.
The most logical starting point would be this property here. Are we ready to move on to the next one?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So the final option for Bridge Street West is the one where the access road, get this a little bigger. Move this. There we go. The access road lines up a little bit better with Dean. It's not a perfect match because I was, again, trying to respect the property lines, but it allows for a single access. Still gives you the same look, all the buildings similar in a building line, gives you ability to sort of deal with right now I'm looking at a 10-foot side yard where the other side is 20 feet so that you can create these plazas in between the buildings. Again, the whole idea of shared responsibility, maintenance, it's ultimately going to become a complex, I think. Any thoughts on this plan?
No, it looks good.
This is Frank. I think looks the best of all of them so far.
I'm with you, Frank. I like the line up with Dean Avenue.
Those who like this one better, this third concept, Is that even over the very first one that we had? And that would be the blank slate approach where everything were brand new, no property lines? Marty and Frank, you like this third one over the first one?
No, I'm just thinking that this one might be the most doable out of what's available right now. I don't see that whole thing being taken on as one project.
This is Frank, and I agree 100% with her. The first option is the best, but I think this one is more doable if that's possible.
Just one thing to consider here is our role of planning and zoning commissioners is trying to vision what we'd like to see for the future. I'm not saying that none of these three concepts won't work, but really, what do we want to see for this warehouse point?
This is Frank. I agree totally with the concept that we're trying to see what we'd like to see, but we also have to be fairly realistic. I mean, there's a lot of things I'd like to see that I know just couldn't be done, but I'm not going to put that into our plan of conservation development because I know it can't work.
Terry, from your option one to this, I see you have square footages on each building. What's the total difference in square footage? Because obviously, in the aggregate, one building, you'll pick up more square footage. Do you
Correct.
have an idea?
Yeah, it's probably, we probably pick up another 40% square footage.
So, I mean, from a development sales point, the aggregate is you have more leasable space, more revenue potential.
Correct. You get more revenue potential to offset the aggravation that would be required and the outlay that would be required to aggregate all those properties.
Right. So larger upfront investment, but more return on the other end.
Correct.
Do you think if someone were to develop this concept here and they were the property closest to the main fish house?
This one here.
Yep, right where you call it. Do you think if they were to, let's say you develop a retail there and they wanted to go to the property all the way down by South Water, do you think that they would park their car and walk down to the spot? All the way down to the ends out there north under this concept where there's individual buildings rather than a plaza type?
Well, I think the idea here is that much of the retail that would be serviced here are people who already live in the neighborhood. I think there's a lot more people who walk around Warehouse Point than you think. And that by adding, for example, each one of these would be retail, you could put a residence or two up on the upper floor, so you would have people living in the vicinity. You would get some number of people, because this is America, this is what we do, who are going to park here, and then if they've got something to do over in this building, they're going to drive and they're going to park over here. It's possible, but right now what we have is we've got the lower sidewalk shown here, which dips down and follows the grade of the road. In order to maintain the clearance for flood zone, we have an upper sidewalk that's about 2.5 to 3 feet higher that ties into the floor elevations of these buildings. So this is flat if you go this route. And this is flat if you go this route. You got a ramp in the stair complex because down in this corner, we got to pick up grade to get down. We flatten the road a little bit, but this is, as you can see, this is at 36 and all these buildings are at 40, 41. So there is a grade differential that gets taken up over here. So this will be a little lower than this, but otherwise it's flat. So it's easy walking.
I like it.
Any other comments on the plan?
So do we keep all three? I vote that we do.
It's my intent to keep all three.
I agree.
This is Frank. I agree. Keep all three.
I do also. It'll be interesting to see what the public's input is, where their favorites are.
I think a lot of that is going to depend on the elevation drawings that you have next.
Right. Okay. Are we ready to move on?
Yes.
Yep.
So what we did was we took these plans and we tried to aggregate what it might look like. So the next two are the images as to what that intersection might look like. And we did base this a little bit on what we had done previously. So you'll notice, for example, on some of my plans, I have curves on this building, curves on this building. That's nice to draw, but you know you're going to end up with something square. So you can start to see in this image, you see you have this lower sidewalk here. And even though it doesn't really show in this photograph, it actually dips down in this area here. So then you have the upper sidewalk where the building floors are. So you can see that differential from a grading perspective. The way this this series of photos were taken, it looks like this area is lower than this area because it tilts, but it isn't really. Okay, so this is essentially at the same elevation as this area over here. So although it looks like it dips, it's an optical problem with how the pans were taken, and I can't really fix that. So just the plans reflect what the finished floor elevations are. One of the things that we looked at was the idea of having a signature building in the corner, you know, a clock tower or something. This one got a little bit more monumental in this version, but I think it still works. And then we're entertaining the idea that we could have a 3-story building in this area. What you can't see in this picture is underneath this building, because the land drops quickly over on that lot, is an underground or below building parking underneath here. So trying to get a sense of scale, see what you think. You know, every once in a while I try and throw this 3 stories in and then just see how people respond.
So Terry, interesting, you got the 3 stories in this image, but on some of the earlier drawings for South Water Street, you talked us out of the 3 stories. That's farther down the street.
They are the 2-story, all the 2-story or 2.5-story images are on the north side. This one building, which is sort of unique here, kind of your opportunity for a few more dense elements. Plus, I was trying to get some retail on the street side of Bridge Street so that you lose a little bit of the square footage for units. It's not as big a building as you would think. If you go back to the plan, it's only, the size of this thing is about 4,000 square feet on the floor. So it's not as big a building as it looks in this image. It's kind of stretched. But it's only 4,000 square foot footprint. So you can imagine, so, you know, how big that is. What do you guys think?
I don't think these people are following social distancing guidelines.
Well, it's summer, so we're hoping that that's going to be all over.
Is that Frank walking his dog?
It sure looks like it, huh?
Oh, that's my wife walking me.
Terry, I like this.
Excellent.
I
Terry,
like the contrast. And is that more like, that's an L-shaped building anyway, that big 3-story thing? That's not a big.
It's just a chunk. It's not very big, but it's a chunk.
Okay. But I think because of the balconies and the light, you know, the bump outs and the architecture make it look not so, you know, I mean, if it was just a big flat faced thing, it would look worse.
Much more imposing.
I like it, Terry. This is Frank. I like it.
I like it too, Terry. I do have a question though. Why couldn't the sidewalk just go straight across and the light on Dean Avenue be moved accordingly?
Okay, so the sidewalk goes straight across. You mean instead of having the Jersey barrier?
Yeah, that it just goes straight from sidewalk to sidewalk. And then, the light is behind that, so people, and you have one of those walk, don't walks.
Well, the reason why we're not going straight across here is because this is the dedicated bike lane coming off the bridge. So you're going to have people on bikes. So the idea was to give them the opportunity to come around and slow down. And somewhere over here, there's a crosswalk, so that you're not, that interface between the pedestrian and the bicyclists on their bicycle enables it to sort of come to an end. The difficulty is that we cannot extend the bike lane up Bridge Street here because we don't have enough pavement right now or potentially right of way.
Okay, so that wall is going to go down South Water Street until you do end up with a crosswalk.
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions on this image?
No, it's nice to see what things could be.
So the next one is just looking the other direction towards the bridge. So you can get a sense of kind of streetscape here for this particular building and that whole idea of the sidewalk elevation change and then the upper level up there for that particular building. So just so because really it's hard to tell, but this side of the road is lower than this side of the road.
Terry, this is Frank. How wide is that green space on the headed towards Windsor Locks?
Over here, this part?
Yes, that's correct.
Yep, it's about, let's see, it's about a 15-foot swath.
Oh, that's quite wide. It surprises me that they're set back so far.
It's just so we get the topography. Well, what it is the property lines over there are, let's just put it this way, the existing buildings that are there are on the property lines.
Okay.
Okay.
What is the slope? What's the grade from road level up to the building lines?
It's about a 3%. It's a 3-foot change of grade plus or minus. So it's over 15. It's less than 10%. So you could theoretically walk across through here, but making sidewalk connections would make them all handicap ramps.
Right. Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody have any other comments?
I do not.
I'm all set.
We're all set. So that is the end of the visuals at this point. I'm still working on a couple other plans that I'll have for the next meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, I do have one more, sorry, forgot about that. This is the police station annex property. Just clean that up, see what it could be. This one includes whether the building stays in place or becomes something new. However that would work for this structure here. Takes this part of the building down and resets it, creates a kind of a community, although designated parking spaces, because now all of these are sort of individually rented out and occupied. This could become storefronts along Bridge Street. and then residential of some kind above, or office above, or something of that nature. It allows for shared public parking along Dean, and a new park and play area, sort of better contained in the corner, as well as the possibility of access and an expansion for the nursing home, and cleaning up their parking, providing a little bit more parking for the existing conditions, which is a lot of parking up on Spring Street these days. So just trying to clean that up a little bit. Just give you an idea of kind of how that flow could work, and how that might look.
I think it looks good.
I think it looks great.
I'm sure that I could, I mean, long-term, when whoever takes over this, you know, if any of this happens, I'm sure we could get more parking spaces. As you can see, there's a little bit of extra room in here this way. But not knowing what the ultimate use would be, I'm just going to leave that for, you know, the next group who decides to commit to something, if the town ever decides to develop that or reconsider what this property is.
Where the new park and play area is that out of the question regarding showing a building there?
This area, which is a nice, stable neighborhood, has no public recreation except for this area here. So other than the green, there is no place, and the ball fields, there's actually no place for kids to go. There's no play structures, and there's already an existing version of that. So we know that the people who live on Dean already use the facility for parking, and that the play area is regularly used. So it's kind of it's a neighborhood park. My suggestion, certainly you could put another building there if you were looking for revenue. But I think as an amenity for the neighborhood, it just adds that much more quality of life.
There used to be a ball field there probably about 30 years ago.
So Terry, this would be much more of a municipal project, not a private development.
Well, it'd be a municipal project up to a certain point. I mean, and it could be, you know, maybe there's senior housing here or something of that nature, or you could sell or rent or do something for part of the property where it gets subdivided, and then the municipality maintains that portion. It's got a lot of flexibility.
This is Frank. It sounds good to me. There is a lot of flexibility here.
Any other thoughts or comments?
No, I'm good.
I'm fine with this.
So then the last piece is just trying to figure out how we want to end this project. Obviously, as you've been talking about so far, let me just clean this up a little bit here. With the COVID-19, how we have our final public participation component, what's still in the budget, what we can do. I wanted to consider a couple of alternatives and throw them out to you as to how you want to handle this. We could do, because my intent is to try and do something in May for public review for this, so that we can finish it up with a final report and review at the end of May and then through June, so that we can we have to kind of wrap this up. So here's a couple of options. We can do a full presentation, just like we're doing here, as part of one of the Planning and Zoning Commission meetings, as a Zoom, notice to the public. We'd have to have the information available to the public and call in information out to the public, which you're already doing. I'm not saying that you aren't. It's just trying to put it all together. The positives is that it occurs as part of a regular meeting and it allows for some public access. The negatives is that it's obviously allows for only limited public access due to the meeting time, the need for the internet equipment, and whether or not the people who are interested in Warehouse Point decide to participate. And we'd like to sort of take some of the momentum that we got from the previous versions, as well as the success that you had getting people interested in the Route 5 project, and sort of keep it going. There's no new costs to this, and that the town could notice on the paper and on the website. So that's kind of nothing different than what you're currently doing. It's probably the one that's going to get the least amount of interest from a public perspective. The second option would be to create a simple survey that we could put on SurveyMonkey to sort of get some feedback about Warehouse Point in general. But most of these simple surveys are word-based questions, and given how much time we've spent on all these images, would really be nice to get some feedback on those particular images to see if we're heading in the right direction, so that we can finish that up with the draft zoning regulations. Again, it's no extra costs, but we're going to be getting limited feedback. The third option would be to do a little bit more detailed survey that would enable us to put the images up to be able to get people feedback. It would be accessible to everyone through the website, or we can create some links in order to make that happen. And we would be able to post the images, get people's feedback, and leave some more open-ended questions out there to get people to sort of talk through some of their ideas. In order to make this happen, there's a fee in order to make that work. To use like SurveyMonkey tools so that we can do the images. The free stuff is very simple. This would be a much more complicated process, be much more in depth. And the information that we would gather would be much more thorough. There is these sorts of expenses included as reimbursable expenses within the monies available for the project itself. So there's no additional costs to the town. Just throwing that out there. One of the other ways would be to actually do a paper survey, create a list and handouts and paper, and mail it to all 269 property owners in Warehouse Point. And because we have that property owner list already created, and that the recipient, they could fill it out and then mail it back, so that they don't need to have access to the internet. They just mail it back. We'd have some printing costs and some mailing costs, but again, we do have that monies included within the budget itself. But that would be the downside to this one, would be to limit what we could. We're only sending it to Warehouse Point property owners, and you may want to open it up to more people. Another option would be to have some sort of, we could create a public call-in, where we announce that we're taking questions and answers, and to be able to put that out onto either public access or some other internet access. Like, for example, I could do a Zoom thing to everybody, and we'd get some call-in component happening and answer questions. It'd be boring to watch, but it would be, I think, allow people to access it if they want. The grant has a total of $7,200 worth of reimbursable expenses, saving approximately $2,000 for final report printing, and that leaves us about $5,200 of out-of-pocket expenses. This would have been used for like food at the meeting, renting chairs and tables, you know, if we were doing an in-person meeting. So I guess my first question is, are we comfortable with the schedule? And should we be considering one of these options, or possibly, I was trying to figure out if we could actually do two of the options. It really just comes down to money at that point, to be able to get as many people as possible. So I wanted to get your feedback as to what you thought was the best choice.
Terry, this is Anne. I guess I'm thinking some kind of hybrid approach.
Mhm.
I think making it part of the planning and zoning meeting is too long for people to have to listen to.
Yeah, on their computer, yes. Yeah.
I just think that's painful. What I see in town, and maybe I'm wrong, but there is a very strong Facebook crowd and a bunch of town Facebook sites.
Mhm.
So I'm wondering if you could do a town blast to the town of East Windsor kind of Facebook and notice a Zoom meeting to present the plan and take comment, and then do a mailer to the property owners inviting them to participate. So they would get direct mail. I don't know how you get, I'll say, the tenant population of Warehouse Point. Probably impossible. 'Cause
Yeah, at this point,
you
we
can't post at the library and you can't post at the police station because no one's going anywhere.
right.
The only place you could put up a poster would be Geisler's, I guess.
I agree with Ann as far as the mailings. We got the most people out when we did the mailings at the church.
Mhm.
A
Yep.
ton of people showed up.
Yep.
I think Ann's talking about doing like a Facebook Live kind of deal instead of trying to do Zoom, because everybody has Facebook. I don't know if that's feasible. I think that's where she's going with that.
I'll look into it.
I was just thinking there's a lot of chatter on the town Facebook pages.
There
So
is.
that's where people are reading what's going on in town, because the newspapers have basically no coverage.
I agree.
I'm sure people go to the town website, but there's a ton of daily chatter about what's going on in town, and where someone saw a bobcat or whatever. That's where it's happening.
This is Frank, and that has been my experience also, Ann. I think you're hit it right on the head.
I'll see what I can come up with respect to that interface with Facebook, whether we can actually just, on the one hand, we can just use it to identify and tell people that we're going to do this, but we could also use Facebook to actually ask some questions and get some answers.
Yes, you could, because they will all chat on there. But
This
I
is
think
Joe.
you want them to hear a presentation of the concept too. And I don't know if Facebook is the place to do that, or it's the place to promote going to the, wherever the forum is, to see it online.
This is Joe. I don't necessarily disagree with the suggestions made, but I really feel it's important that somebody walk through or explain the process to the residents of East Windsor, particularly Warehouse Point. So they need to be stepped through the process. And there needs to be a feedback loop with our consultant and the Planning and Zoning Commission. If that feedback loop is not complete, their ideas are going to run rampant, and I think they're going to go off. They're going to misinterpret what our intentions are here. If this were a traditional public hearing, we would have those controls. We would be able to extinguish any misinformation about what's being planned here. We're not building anything. These are planning concepts.
Right.
Joe, this is Ann. I guess maybe I'm not being clear enough in my thinking, but my thinking is you use Facebook as the tool to reach people that they need to tune into a Zoom thing on date X, and then you do that presentation and overview for them there.
Okay, so that's an invitation.
The Facebook is the advertising.
Terry, do we have any hard deadline dates that we have to meet?
Technically, the grant was supposed to be completed in December. For various different reasons, it's extended, but I don't believe DECD is concerned. I just think that it's, from our perspective, we're heading towards the end, and waiting. We always like to have public hearings and discussions on these sorts of reports before summer vacations.
Okay.
It's a weird year, but that's kind of the general rule of thumb.
Well, I mean, we're kind of living in a fluid situation now that things change almost on a daily basis. And my personal opinion is that within the next month or two, we should see some type of, easing of restrictions, and, there might be a possibility to put together some type of a modified social distance face-to-face meeting. To me, that's still the best, being able to present it live face-to-face is the best alternative.
Mike, it's Ann. I agree with you, but I guess I'm not as hopeful as you are that the end of this social distancing is in sight. I think we're going to live in a constrained world for a while.
When you look at a town that we've had 18 cases in the entire town, I don't think we live under the same restrictions as, a New York or even a Bridgeport area would.
This is Frank, but I don't know if our governor will allow us to do that. It appears to me that he's going to be a lot stricter than we're talking about. And I agree with Ann. This could go on until September.
Yeah, this is Ann again. I think this could go on a long time because there's just too much unknown, and I don't think the world is ready for it to get worse.
So let me toss these ideas out. Terry is suggesting a schedule of either late April or May. That being said, none of regarding our social distancing requirements, none of that's going to be lifted prior to that time. So I think we're going to have to go with one of these options or a hybrid thereof. I don't think there's going to be any situation where we could have a face-to-face meeting with the public.
Well, that's what I was asking. Can we be talking June, July, or August for this?
Well,
That's a very good question. That would be my concern. I'd like to see it face-to-face in August, September, but we have time constraints, I'm sure. Plus, Terry would like to get paid, I'm sure.
I like to see things finished. Well, I think we don't have to make a decision this evening, but we will need to make some sort of decision probably at the next meeting. So if you want to contemplate it, what I will do is I'm going to look at what capabilities there might be out there for Facebook. The other thing that we might want to consider is, although I don't generally like to do these, but we could actually do a series of narratives, either as YouTube videos or some sort of way to get people to actually hear what people are saying. So let me see if we can do that. I think a 2-hour Zoom meeting, which is probably the minimum that we would need to explain what we're trying to do here, would be complicated. Because I can't, for example, like the thing that everybody liked at the church meeting with the clickers, I can't do that through a Zoom meeting. What I'm thinking is that we might be able to do that more likely through like a Survey Monkey or something like that. So we can get, ongoing, you can see the responses that other people had as you go through. So there's a little bit of a feedback loop. It just doesn't include a direct access to planning and zoning, which is the unfortunate part.
The other problem I see is, we have 6 or 7 people and we talk over each other. If we got a participation group of 30 people, nobody'd be able to speak.
Well, one of the things that Zoom does is it does actually give you a control where you have to press the button. It's not active in this meeting, but if you have to press the button in order to be indicate that you wish to speak, and then there's a control to allow someone to speak.
So why don't we defer a final decision until our next discussion? But fellow commissioners, we have to agree to something here. One thing I do like, I do like the mailing option in combination with something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking, the presentation part is a sort of no-brainer. We can do that at any time. The only downside is we don't really have enough money to mail to all of East Windsor. It would be limited to Warehouse Point. That's all.
That's fine. But with the mailings, include a narrative, like project narrative.
Yeah, my intent would be like a 5 or 6 page actual printed survey where people could see the image, see what they like, make a response, that sort of thing.
Okay, is it really only pictures and image feedback? Or
Yep.
would it be able to tell the whole story, what it is we're trying to accomplish here in town?
I don't think it's going to tell the whole story because, just trying to explain the process is going to, if you think about it, think about how you would lay that out as a script. It's at least a page long, and I think nobody will read that. So it'll go straight into some sort of response to the images, is if I had to guess.
Okay. Is everyone okay with that? Deferring the decision to our next meeting?
Yeah, let's see what the future holds here.
Yeah, I'd like to hold off until the next meeting.
Ditto on that.
Okay. Terry, you have anything else for us to talk about in this
No.
project?
I'm all set. I appreciate you guys' feedback, and we'll make that a couple modifications to the future land use plan so that we can deal with that, and then finish up those last couple of site plans for the next meeting and start putting it together in terms of draft regulations is basically what we were doing. Those draft regulations would probably not be part of what we're talking about with the public. That's part of the final package. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your effort tonight.
No problem. You guys have a good night.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you
Thank you,
very much.
You too. We're reaching the end of our agenda here. Under our other business, there's an item to increase town permit application fees by $10 effective July 1st, 2020. This is an information item, no action required. I know, I don't know where this is coming from. Jay, you have any background?
I do. So with the conversion over to Permit Link, which is our new permitting software, there is a $10 per permit fee to use the software. So we're trying to pass that cost on to the applicants rather than have it eat into town revenues. We've done a comparison for most of the permitting that we have in place, and we're in many cases well below neighboring towns. So I think a $10 increase for the cost of utilizing the software is a reasonable ask. Not sure if it's relevant to planning or planning and department permitting, but I know the Board of Selectmen in the near future is going to be looking at building department permits and adjusting that fee schedule to make it a little bit more contemporary than it is. So Really, this is just linked to the $10 fee associated with the permits that we're going to be processing, and we just want to make you aware that we'd like to adjust our zoning permits so that they're reflective of or inclusive of that cost. We don't want to have it be broken out as a separate cost. It's easier, and this according to the vendor, it's just easier if it's all lumped in with one transaction. So rather than doing a permit fee for $150 plus a $10 software licensing fee, it's just easier to have it be $160. It's a paperwork move, but that's where this is coming from. And that's what the intention is.
Jay, I'm not necessarily opposed to this at all. I'm just kind of curious regarding the process in the party that has authority to do this. Does that lie with the Board of Selectmen regarding these fees? And the reason why I ask that is because under previous administration and prior town planner Lori, we visited this many years ago for a triage of reasons. We didn't really move from here, but it was on an item on our agenda. Whether maybe it was just for our information with a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, maybe that was the final outcome. I don't understand the process. Who has the final say on what these numbers should be?
So that's a perfectly legit question, and it's one that I did ask. Ruben is the one who told me that it was the purview of the Planning and Zoning Commission to set. My first thought was that it's under my purview to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I have not checked the statute for where the jurisdiction lies. I certainly can do that, and I will. But it's on your agenda because Ruben told me you guys had to sign off on it. And because we're going live with this permit software in the near future, we wanted to get this done and behind us. So if the Planning and Zoning Commission is okay with it and the Board of Selectmen is okay with it, then somewhere the jurisdiction there is met. But if there's a stumbling block along the way, then I need to get that cleared up or find an alternative. I mean, we're going with this software vendor. We've made that determination. And that's clearly within the first selectmen's and probably just the first selectmen's purview to do that. So there is going to be this additional $10 fee, and we know based on an analysis that we do somewhere around 1,500 permits per year in terms of zoning permits, building permits, wetlands permits, and the like. It's somewhere around 1,500. So we know that the cost to us is going to be about $15,000. I don't have the $15,000 to absorb it, so I need to pass that on to the applicant some way. And this is just the way that seems to be the cleanest. But you raise a good question. I can check on the statutory construct to find out whose jurisdiction it is.
As a contractor, I know that the fees in town are relatively low compared to other towns because we pull permits in multiple towns around us: West Hartford, South Windsor, Enfield, Ellington, and our fees are pretty low. So to raise this as a contractor's point of view, we wouldn't even blink an eye at these fees. This is cost of doing business.
Well, I think that actually is an opportunity for another conversation to see if the fee schedule in general, so one of the things that I heard a lot about when I was campaigning was that we want to see economic development happen in town. So I'm really, before this COVID thing happened and totally knocked the world off its axis, I was really trying to figure out how do we set a message that East Windsor is open for business and we want to see responsible development happen here, and make sure that the employees in town government understand that we need to be presenting a customer service friendly, forward-facing attitude in terms of interacting with people, and also kind of balancing those other things where, for whether it be fees or regulatory stuff or whatever it happens to be, whether we're taking stances that put us counter to that pro-growth economic development mantra, you know what I mean? So Rand has done an analysis on building department fees in neighboring communities that the Board of Selectmen will be taking up at our May 7th meeting. And that probably is the first step in a conversation on making sure that we're modernizing that. I don't have any idea when the last time your fee structure in general was addressed. I mean, you guys have some long-serving members. You probably do know, but I don't remember it in my time.
This is Frank, and I don't remember it, and I've been on for 25 years plus. How about you, Joe?
We talked about it about 5 years ago, but it never really got a lot of traction.
Correct. Yes, I remember that distinctly with Lori.
Jason, this is Anne, and just from a resident's perspective who has done probably, compared to most people, a lot of, I call it maintenance on my house, and having taken out a lot of permits in the past year, feels like it, and seeing a huge increase in the assessment of my house and paying for all these, it feels like a lot of money. And it's almost overall discouraging to try to maintain your property the way it should be maintained.
That's the balance, you know. I mean, I'm not coming to you with a plan to address that yet. I'm just saying, like, it's on the radar for sure. Is something that we need to, that I want to look at. You know, I also want to look at the approval processes from the first time an applicant walks in the door till the last time they get the last permit approval that they need, and where those pinch points along the way are that make it difficult for people to put a deck on their house or build a new business in town or relocate, or, you know, there's, my philosophy with government in general is that it's a customer service business. And if you're going to be in a customer service industry, you have to always be prepared to acknowledge that your customer service can be better. It's not a fault to anyone. It's not a criticism of anyone. There's always ways of reinventing things to make sure you're delivering a service that meets the needs of your customers in a more direct way. And so one of the things that we'll be doing if we ever return to normal is taking a look at that process and seeing from the first point to the last point, how can we make that go better? Are our fees where they need to be? Are we making sure that simple things like we're responding to emails in a timely fashion, we're greeting people with a smile and with helpful information? One of the things I heard anecdotally is that a particular department required somebody who was looking to do business, to build a business, to FOI a piece of information because we were too busy to get it to them. That's like wholly unacceptable to me. So there's a little bit of a culture change. There's a little bit of a process improvement. There's a little bit of a comparison to like communities and neighboring communities, which are not necessarily the same thing. Portland, Connecticut is very similar to East Windsor, Connecticut, but it's nowhere near East Windsor, Connecticut. So you have to look at like communities and you have to look at neighboring communities. We're not a whole lot like Enfield. So I'm trying to find a whole bunch of balancing acts to try and move things forward so that when we have that business that knocks on the door because there's no more space in South Windsor, that East Windsor is an acceptable alternative that they're excited about coming to, and that we make it easy for them.
But I also think you want homeowners to replace their roofs every 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
You know, replace rotting decks.
Well,
Do little projects without massive add-on fees and massive process.
Yeah, I think our fee structure for building fees is $20 for the first 1,000 of investment, and then it's $10 per 1,000 thereafter.
So, something like that. And then there's a state fee that's involved, 16 cents or 26 cents per 1,000.
And
Yeah.
then there's a health department fee. Before you can go to zoning, you've got to pay the health department.
Yeah, that I have nothing to do over. They're agents of the state. They're agents of DPH.
Jason, this is Frank. Just to regard what you were saying, I'm in complete agreement, and I really feel that some of our town employees are not working hard enough to do exactly what you want to do.
You know, so I'm new. I'm in I think I've been in a little over 4 months now, and for half of that time, we've been in this new reality. So I think that the message and the intentions that I want to project and that I want people to kind of adopt will take a little bit of time to adjust. I mean, I liken it to turning a cruise ship versus turning a speedboat. So, you know, and I also think that I'm not going to be done by the time I'm done. You know, I mean, there's always going to be ways that the things that I'm working on can be made better. So I agree that I don't think we're there yet, Frank, but I think that we certainly can be closer to there by the time my tenure is over.
I also think there's a lot of very helpful people.
Oh, for sure.
Don't misunderstand me. There are a lot of people that work very, very hard. Obviously, Jason's one of them. But there are also people in our myriad of workers in the town that just aren't, in my opinion, just aren't doing the job. I mean, that's strictly my opinion. But if you look around, I think we can find those people, and we can just encourage them to do a better job.
Well, why don't we get back to the agenda in this particular item? So this was just an informational item only. There's no action required of this commission at this time. So this is something, Jay, do you feel differently?
Nope.
Okay.
If I should look at the statute and find out where that authority lies, it may come back to you, but it may also be something that my board takes up, and it's just an FYI. If I could just take a moment to explain, I think I talked a bit about it, but this new permit software that we're converting over to, it's with that customer service model in mind. It is designed so that the applicant will be able to track their own process. So we've had instances where, even in the time that I've been there, I've seen people wandering from office to office in town hall trying to figure out where their application is. You don't even have to come into the building. You'll be able to pull up the application. You'll see that these 3 departments have signed off on it, but these 2 still need approvals for whatever reason. And so you can actually just reach out and say, is there any other information you need before you can move on with the application? So it's an attempt to streamline things. I'm actually kind of excited about it. View permit was supposed to get us there, but we never really took full advantage of that. And now that it's not being supported as of July 1st, I think it's not being supported in a cloud model. We're converting over to this new program called Permit Link. They came in, they did a demonstration for me, I think in my 3rd or 4th week. And having never seen any of our permitting software before, this was like crazy intuitive. You could easily, with no basis at all, you could easily figure out how this would make your process better. So anyway, your commission's purview is important to me. And I think that there is some really good work that we can do to benefit the community there. And I'm fortunate that I spent a number of years coming to most of your meetings, but I also recognize my own limitations and that I don't know everything about this yet. So I'm trying to get up to speed, but recognize that you guys are going to be kind of front lines in terms of accomplishing some of my objectives, which are to build our grand list.
Well, I agree. You're definitely heading in the right direction. Like I said before, Enfield, I haven't stepped in the building permit or been in that building in probably 3 years. There's no need to. We check everything online. It comes right to us, approved. This has been approved. That's been approved. You're this far in the process. We don't even call them. We just give them a credit card number, send the money in, and it's all done online. It's awesome.
Yeah. As I start to network with my new set of peers around the area, I'm looking to steal good ideas where I can. South Windsor has a really good setup for moving things through the process, and they have a one-stop shop basically. It's one window customer service. So if you're looking for a zoning permit or a building permit or a wetlands permit or anything that town government might be providing, it's literally one window. There's one person who clerks it and helps you navigate whatever process you need. And that's not the reason why South Windsor is seeing the explosion that it is, but it's one of the reasons. They also, we've talked for a long time about bringing on an economic development professional. South Windsor doesn't have one. They're killing it, and they don't have a full-time economic development director. They have a part-time one, and that's their former town manager who's being carried over till the end of the fiscal year, but then he disappears. What they're doing, they're actually using, it's a clearinghouse of sorts. It's like Match.com for developers, right? So there's this company out of Wisconsin, I think is where it is. And if you're a Lowe's or a Costco or a Home Depot or a Coca-Cola or whoever else is building in South Windsor, but is located nationally, they go to a clearinghouse like this and they say, we're looking for a spot with highway access somewhere in the Northeast. And then this clearinghouse has already scouted available property who subscribe to their service. That's what South Windsor has done. And that's one of the reasons why they're just crushing it in terms of grand list growth. So it's actually half the cost of us bringing on a full-time staff person to enroll in this clearinghouse service with most of the legwork already having been done because South Windsor is our neighbor. So they're already familiar with the area. That's an opportunity for us to market commercial properties that we have available. So that's something that I'm going to be approaching the town about once we kind of get settled in after COVID is over, to do an added appropriation for that. The other thing I'm trying to do that's also planning related, and Joe, I'm sorry to monopolize here, but this is interesting stuff. I think it's interesting stuff that I want to share with you guys. I'm trying to develop a commercial parcel inventory and like a marketing brochure, so that we know the map, block, and lot numbers, the utility hookups, the list price, the owner of record, the contact information, aerial views, existing zoning, anything you would want to if you were looking to build on an available parcel. I'm trying to put together basically a brochure that we can then as a marketing tool. And the hope is that sometime in the fall, we'll be able to bring together some commercial real estate agents, and I've already had conversations with some, to say these are the parcels that the town has available that may or may not be on the market, but that we know are available. So I'm trying to be creative in terms of marketing development here. And it's there, as I said, there's no real one solution. It's a collection of small and medium-sized solutions that I think will show progress. But I'm hoping to light your agendas up, is what I'm saying.
Thank you, Jason, for sharing your views and ideas with us. Look forward to working with you and your colleagues.
Also, if you think I'm off base, let me know, because I'm trying my best, but I am well aware of my limitations. And if you guys have a different perspective or a complementary perspective, I welcome it.
Very
Thank
good
I think
job.
you're right on track.
Right on track. You got it going.
We'll see.
Get home and change those diapers.
He is home.
With that, why don't we try to reach the end of our meeting here? So moving on to our business meeting. Item A, general zoning issues, we're not going to talk about. Item B, for the record, signing of Mylars and plans. I haven't received anything to sign. So Jason, I don't know if you want to follow up with staff. There was a motion for zone change approval we made last meeting. These things had been mailed to me and a member of the commission for signature. I haven't seen it.
They were supposed to have been mailed, or you were told they were mailed?
In the past, they had been mailed. I haven't received anything in the mail. So it's on the agenda like it had been signed, but I didn't sign anything because I don't have anything to sign.
Okay, I can follow up with Ruben.
And this is something that if it's a PDF, I can sign it electronically.
Yep.
Is anyone else of the commission? Yes, Dick.
Joe, if that was for the zone change on Bridge Street, I received that and signed it and sent it back in.
Did it have my signature on it?
It had someone's signature on it. I do not remember if it was yours.
Oh, okay.
But I was the second signature, so there was someone else on it.
Okay. Well, I sign hundreds of things through my paying job during the week, so it's something that may have slipped through the cracks. Does anyone else have any final comments before we adjourn for the evening?
It's been a real productive meeting, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it, even though I'm not into this electronic stuff, but it's been a good evening.
Anyone else?
I'm good.
Make a motion, we close. Adjourn.
There's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
A second, Frank?
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Everyone, good night. Thank you very much for your attention to detail and participation. Thank you, our Board of Selectmen members, for helping us tonight.
See you guys later.
Good
Yep,
night.
take care.
Night, folks.
Thank you.
Good night.